was older than her husband. Older than his memories. Older, maybe, than memory itself. It stood at the end of a forgotten road just outside a town with too many churches and not enough children. The kind of town where windows stayed shut, even in spring, where weeds grew in the shape of hands through cracks in the pavement. There were no neighbors nearby, just woods, wind, and the house. When Mira first saw it, she stopped breathing. Not because it was grand, it wasn't. It was tall and thin, stooped like an old man, with flaking green paint and a rusting weather vane that spun too fast, even when the air was still. The porch sagged. Ivy strangled the chimneys. One shutter hung loose like a half-closed eye. But the door was red. Not the polite red of English roses or mailbox flags. This was arterial red, ripe and raw and wet-looking. It stood out like an open wound on the house's weathered chest. "Family home," Daniel said proudly, swinging their bags from the car. "Been in my bloodline for 4 generations." Mira stared at the door. It felt like it was staring back. Inside, the air smelled like dust, dried flowers, and something faintly sweet and wrong, like spoiled perfume. The floorboards whined under her weight. The wallpaper was faded yellow, and in some places it bubbled out as if the walls were breathing. The house sighed with her. Daniel gave her a quick tour. "Kitchen's to the left. Don't go into the basement. Fuse box is dodgy. That's the study. Was Dad's favorite room. He spent most of his time in there until, He never finished the sentence. Mira didn't ask him to. The study door was locked. That night, as they unpacked, Mira noticed strange things. The master bedroom had 2 wardrobes, one full of old pressed suits that hadn't been Daniel's, a set of slippers by the window that were not dusty, a coat, still warm, draped over a chair that rocked on its own. She looked at Daniel, but he was brushing his teeth like everything was normal. At 2:17 a.m., Mira woke suddenly, heart hammering. There was breathing in the room, slow, measured. Not hers. She sat up. The sound stopped. She turned to Daniel, who was asleep beside her, one hand curled near his mouth like a child. But something in the mirror across the room caught her eye. Not a reflection. A shape. A man's silhouette. Standing beside the wardrobe, still. Mira blinked. The mirror was empty. She didn't sleep again that night. Over the next few days, the house began to open itself to her. She found photographs in the attic, sepia-toned, women with downturned mouths and fearful eyes, always standing beside the same man, tall, with black eyes and a sharp widow's peak. He never smiled. He didn't need to. Each photo had the same handwritten caption on the back. She agreed. In the kitchen, the kettle whistled without being turned on. In the bathroom, the mirror fogged up words instead of steam. "That first week," it said, "you look like her." She wiped it clean. It reappeared the next day. "But you don't act like her." One afternoon, Mira was alone. Daniel had gone into town to meet an old friend. The house seemed quieter than usual, but not still. It was watching. She wandered into the sitting room and saw something she hadn't noticed before. A panel behind the grandfather clock slightly ajar. Inside was a tunnel of darkness and the smell of pipe smoke. The corridor led to a small hidden room, an altar of sorts. There was a velvet chair, a desk, a withered bouquet. And on the wall above the desk, a painting. Not a photograph, a painting of her, but it couldn't be, because it was older than she was. The brush strokes captured her cheekbones, her parted lips, the mole near her collarbone, even the scar from her childhood bike fall. The signature at the bottom chilled her blood. For M, with patience, love, and time. She stumbled back, nearly knocking over a candlestick. The house moaned softly behind the walls. That night, Daniel was different. He kept watching her, his head tilted, like he was trying to see something through her. "You're finally settling in," he said. Mira didn't answer. The house was breathing louder now. Mira woke to the sound of clicking metal. The door to the study was unlocked. She didn't remember hearing Daniel get up. The hallway outside the bedroom was empty, the floor creaking only under her weight. The house felt colder than usual, despite the mid-morning light bleeding softly through the high, dirty windows. The study door, always locked, now stood ajar. Its brass handle glinted like an eye-catching light. She hesitated only a moment before pushing it open. The air inside was still, dry, preserved. It smelled like pipe tobacco and books that hadn't been touched in decades. Heavy curtains covered the windows, keeping the light out. Dust hung in the air, suspended like cobwebs in water. There was something reverent about the room, like it hadn't just been shut, but sealed. The desk sat beneath a massive oil painting of a man. Mira knew instantly who it was. Frederick Elias Whitlock, her father-in-law. Younger than in the photos, but no less chilling. Those same eyes, bottomless and sharp. That same solemn expression. He wore a charcoal waistcoat and dark tie, a single gold ring on his left hand, glinting like a threat. She'd seen portraits like this in haunted castles and films. But this one, it didn't feel painted. It felt captured, as though the man was still inside it, watching. Below it, the desk was meticulously organized. Winnie, everything had its place. Leather-bound journals arranged chronologically. A crystal inkwell, and a small silver-framed photograph of a woman Mira didn't recognize. A beautiful woman, with Mira's face. No, not quite Mira, but eerily close. Same shape of lips, same arch in the brow. On the back of the photo was a single word burned into the wood, before. She opened the first journal. Its cover was cracked, but the pages were well kept, lined with precise handwriting. And from the first entry, she felt her pulse crawl. August 3rd. The house approves of her. It dreams of her already. Her voice echoes even when she's silent. I know what it means now, what it wants. So do I. This time she'll stay. She flipped pages, entry after entry, filled with obsession, rituals, incantations, and notes about perfect timing. She has to agree. Consent must be given, even if it's not fully understood. The bride must choose the house. That is how we feed it. Feed it. Feed what? The word agree appeared over and over again, sometimes in ink, sometimes carved into the paper with a knife. She slammed the journal shut. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. When she turned to leave, the door was closed. She hadn't closed it. She reached for the knob, but froze, shuffling behind her. Not footsteps, not a creaking board, a drag, like something shifting slowly across the rug behind the desk. She turned, heart thundering. Nothing. Just the painting, and the shadow beneath it. No, the shadow was wrong. It was longer than the frame, and it moved. Mira stumbled back, fumbling for the handle. The door finally gave with a groan, and she fell into the hallway. Daniel stood there holding a cup of coffee. He looked confused. What were you doing in there? Her mouth was dry. It was open. No, I locked it. I always lock it. He pushed past her into the room. When he turned the light on, the shadow was gone. The desk sat quietly. The books were still. You shouldn't be in here, Mira. His voice was cold, final. She didn't answer, because he didn't notice the photo was gone. That night, she dreamt of the man in the painting. He stood at the foot of her bed, his ring catching the moonlight. He held out his hand, palm up, as though offering something. When she leaned forward, she saw a key in it. A small, old iron key. She took it. She woke with it clenched in her fist. The iron key was old, ridged and cold against her skin, even in the morning sunlight. Mira turned it over and over in her hand, as if by some miracle, it would explain itself. It hadn't vanished with the dream. It hadn't turned to ash or vapor. It was real. And it hadn't come from Daniel. He was already gone when she woke up. A note on the kitchen table read, "Groceries and hardware store. Back by 3. Don't go poking around, okay?" She made coffee, barely drank it, then tucked the key into the pocket of her robe. The house was still. Too still. Even the walls seemed to be holding their breath. She decided to shower. A distraction. Steam billowed quickly in the bathroom, fogging the cracked mirror above the sink and covering the cold tiles and condensation. For a moment, she let the water soak her hair, calm her skin, ease her thoughts. But then she heard it again. A voice. Low, male, whispering. She shut off the water and froze. It continued, even in the silence. Muffled words behind the wall. Right behind the faucet, as though someone was murmuring through the pipes. She leaned close. And this time she heard it clearly. "You're almost ready." She scrambled out of the tub, grabbing a towel, slipping on the wet floor and crashing against the side. The cold tiles met her cheek. Her heart was thudding so hard it hurt. When she stood and wiped the fogged mirror, new words had appeared in the condensation. "You took the key. Now open the door." She gasped. The letters faded as she touched them. She backed away, shaking. The door behind her creaked open. Not the bathroom door. The hidden panel behind the bedroom armoire, the one she hadn't touched since discovering it last week, was open. She could see the tunnel again, the dark velvet shadows beckoning. It hadn't been open when she'd entered the bathroom. Her robe pocket was heavy. The key throbbed with cold. Mira stood at the threshold of the tunnel. The walls of it breathed, ever so slightly, like a throat. She stepped inside. The air was cooler here, but not unpleasant, almost comforting, like a room that hadn't been entered in years but was prepared for her return. She reached the end of the narrow passage. There was another door now, wooden, old, wrapped in chains and rusted locks. There was a hole in the middle of the door, for a key. When the key clicked into place, Mira hesitated. Her body felt pulled, as if something behind the door was already drawing her in. She turned it. The lock released with a hiss, and the chains fell away as if they'd been waiting. The room beyond was lit by candlelight. It smelled like lavender, old perfume, and something like fresh blood beneath. She stepped inside. The walls were lined with mirrors, antique ones, warped and black-spotted. Each of them reflected not her now, but her in other times. Wearing different clothes, speaking different words, kissing a man who looked like her father-in-law. But in some mirrors, she wasn't Mira at all. She was other women, dozens of them, all with her face, all in different eras, all looking at the same man. A man standing behind her in each reflection. Frederick. He never aged. Then in the center of the room, she saw it. A tub. An antique clawfoot tub filled to the brim with crimson-colored water. Roses floated on top, their petals wilting. A white nightgown hung on the wall above it. And beside it a note. Cleanse, prepare, become. He only comes to the willing. Mira backed away, heart racing. The mirrors began to fog. And one by one they whispered, "Agree, accept, invite him." She ran. Back through the tunnel, back into the main bedroom, slamming the hidden panel shut behind her. But as she collapsed onto the bed, she saw a wet footprint at the edge of the mattress. It wasn't hers. Mira didn't sleep that night. She lay stiff beneath the covers, watching the corners of the room for movement, for breathing, for shadows that didn't belong. Daniel didn't notice, or pretended not to. When she mentioned the bathroom mirror fogging with words, he gave a tight-lipped smile. "Old pipes do weird things in this house." That was all he said. She didn't tell him about the room behind the tunnel, or the tub, or the mirrors that showed women who wore her face but lived in centuries not her own. She didn't want to hear more lies. She wanted answers. So she returned to the study. The portrait watched her as she entered, Frederick's gaze as cold and full of judgment as a priest in a confessional. She ignored it and went to the bottom drawer of the desk. It had been stuck before, but this time it slid open like butter. Inside was a red leather-bound book, not like the other journals. This one had no title, no dates, just initials etched into the inside cover. Few, her father-in-law's diary. Her hands shook as she opened it. To capture her, one must become her echo. To seduce her, one must speak in her voice before she knows it's hers. She arrives again, always different, always the same. Skin in new shades, eyes that blink forgotten rhythms. But she always returns, always. The house brings her back. My son thinks he married her, but he's just a vessel. The contract isn't between them. It's between me and her. It always has been. Mira's stomach turned. Was this madness? Some elaborate fiction written by a lonely man descending into dementia? Or was it something worse, a ritual? She turned the page. There, a drawing, a symbol. A spiral with 7 small red dots marked in specific places. Beneath it, 7 echoes, 7 lives. 7 times she agrees. This is the 6th. Mira felt the chill of realization crawl up her spine. She was the 6th. There were 5 before her. 5 women who looked like her, who lived with this man, who agreed. But to what? And why was he still here? Further in the book, the handwriting became shakier, more frantic. She forgets every time, but the house remembers. She resists in the beginning. That is natural. That is necessary. But in time, the whispers soften her. In time, she becomes mine again. It's not possession. It's reunion. Then, the bath readies her. The mirror seals her. The 7th will be eternal. Mira closed the book with a snap. The 7th? She hadn't even agreed once. But she'd already taken the key. She'd already entered the room. She'd already seen the visions. Had her agreement already begun? As she stood to leave, something changed in the study. The temperature dropped. The light dimmed. And in the mirror behind the desk, the reflection wasn't hers. It was one of the others. A woman in a Victorian gown. Pale, dead-eyed, holding the same red diary. She lifted a finger to her throat, as if tracing something Mira couldn't see. Then slowly, deliberately, she smiled. Mira ran. Back in the bedroom, she found Daniel sitting on the bed, staring at the wall. He looked strange, tense, sweat on his brow. "Are you okay?" she asked. He turned to her slowly. "He spoke to me today." Mira's throat tightened. "Who?" Daniel looked at her, eyes bloodshot and empty. "He said it's almost time, and that you're finally listening." That evening, the house smelled like roasted meat and lavender. Mira hadn't cooked. Daniel hadn't either. He'd barely moved from the bed after whispering those unsettling words. He said it's almost time. Since then, he'd gone quiet, eyes blank, as if something had settled into his skin and pulled the rest of him far beneath. Mira wandered down the stairs and found the dining room glowing with candlelight. Alone, the table was set for 3. Silverware she didn't recognize gleamed on ivory napkins. 3 wine glasses, 3 tall chairs. And in the center, a polished silver platter. Empty, waiting. She should have run, should have left through the front door, bare feet and all. But the house breathed, and her feet obeyed. On the wall above the fireplace was a new painting. Frederick again. Older this time, more gaunt. But this time he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a woman in a red silk gown. Mira. She stepped closer. Her lips in the painting were slightly parted, a faint smile drawn across her face. But her eyes, they were empty, like a doll's. There was a card tucked beneath the plate in her seat. She picked it up. "You are cordially invited to accept your place, to feed, to remember, to return. Dinner begins at midnight. Signed, your devoted host." At the stroke of midnight, she found herself descending the stairs again, this time not resisting. The house seemed to pull her gently, lovingly, like a hand at the small of her back. Daniel was already at the table. He wore a black suit, like the one Frederick had worn in the portrait. He didn't look up when she entered. His eyes were vacant, his hands folded neatly in his lap. The third chair was pulled out, as if someone had just stood from it, or was about to sit. Mira took her seat slowly. The candles flickered, and then the third chair moved. She didn't see him enter. She didn't need to see. She felt him. Frederick. The air thickened, perfumed with ash and rose water. A shadow crossed the wall beside her, impossibly tall. The silverware rattled slightly, as though vibrating with anticipation. Then the platter lid lifted. No hand touched it. It simply rose. Inside there was no food, only a small, red velvet box. Mira reached out and opened it. Inside was a ring. Antique, ornate, the same one Frederick wore in all the photos. It pulsed with warmth. "Put it on," Daniel said. His voice was no longer his. It was deeper, older, full of gravel and longing. Mira looked at him, and in his place she saw something else. The shape of him blurred. For a moment, it wasn't Daniel sitting across from her. It was Frederick, younger, smiling, alive. The ring slid easily onto her finger. The room sighed, the candles flared, and the mirrors lining the walls shimmered. In them, she saw all of the others again, dressed for dinner, sitting with Frederick, wearing the same ring, each of them smiling, each of them changed. Frederick's voice filled the room now. "You've always belonged here, Mira. You just forgot. Every time you come back, you remember a little sooner. This time you brought yourself to the table. You agreed." The floor beneath her trembled. The ceiling cracked like ancient bones popping loose. The ring burned cold, and Mira, trembling, looked into the mirror again, only to find that this time her reflection was gone. Mira woke up in the study. Not the bed, not the dining room, not even the floor. The study, as if she'd been placed there, like a precious object returned to a shelf. The red ring still clung to her finger like frostbite. Her skin underneath it looked slightly bruised, slightly claimed. And on the desk before her lay a stack of envelopes, cream-colored, tied neatly with a wine-red ribbon. Her name was written on each one, Mira Evelyn Whitlock. Not the name she'd been born with, not the name she took after marriage, but a name she'd never used and still remembered. The handwriting was unmistakable, her own. But it wasn't possible. She'd never written these. She'd never even seen this paper before. Her fingers shook as she opened the first envelope. Inside was a letter, written in delicate, perfect script. It read, "Dearest Frederick, I've been dreaming of the house again, the way the woods sighs when I pass, the way your shadow lingers in the hallway after dark. I can hear the echoes calling, always calling. I miss you terribly. I know you'll find me again. You always do. Yours eternally, Mira." She dropped the paper. Her pulse pounded in her ears. The second letter was worse. "You promised I'd remember sooner this time, that I wouldn't run again, that the bond would take root more quickly. It's working, isn't it? I see your eyes in Daniel's. I see your mouth in the mirror. I can feel you in my bones when the house goes still. Is it wrong that I don't feel afraid anymore? I'm tired of fighting you. I'm ready to return. Just say the words again. Say them like you did the first time. Say, you are mine." Mira stepped away from the desk. The walls began whispering again. Soft voices, feminine voices. Her voice multiplied and layered and soaked in different accents and eras. "I wrote them. We all did. We all came back. And we all agreed. This is the sixth echo. The seventh never ends." The fire in the hearth lit itself. The study door locked behind her. The painting of Frederick above the desk moved. Not in a jarring way, but subtly. His expression sharpened. His lips curved slightly upward. Almost proud, almost patient. And then one more envelope appeared on the desk. Not tied, not addressed. Mira opened it. "Tonight, at the bath. Wear the red dress. You remember the one. This time we seal it properly. Come willingly. You already know the way. She looked up. A mirror on the far wall had begun to fog. In the steam, a new message wrote itself. Letter by agonizing letter. One more night, one final yes. Mira didn't remember walking outside. One moment she was staring into the mirror in the study. The next, she was barefoot in the cold morning dew, standing in the center of the rear garden. Except it wasn't the garden she remembered. The roses were gone, the hedges overgrown. And from every branch and stalk and stem, there hung gloves, dozens, hundreds, dangling from thorned vines and nailed to trees. Leather gloves, silk gloves, lace gloves, gardening gloves, some pristine, some soaked in mildew and something darker. Some were child-sized, some were far too large. Some looked familiar. Mira stepped forward, hypnotized. Her foot crunched on something, a tiny white button. She looked down. The soil was full of bones, fingertips, teeth, rings. There was a bench in the center of the garden, and seated on it was a figure in a dark red dress. Mira's breath caught in her throat. The woman had her face, but it wasn't just a reflection. It wasn't a trick of the mirrors. It was one of the others. Her hair was longer, her skin paler. She looked older? No, timeless. The woman turned toward Mira and smiled softly. You're almost done resisting, she said. I was like you once. Mira stepped closer, entranced. Who are you? I'm who you become, the woman said, when you stop pretending you're new to this. She held out a pair of gloves. Red silk. Wear them. He likes them best. Mira didn't take them. Her gaze drifted to a tree nearby, massive and dying, its bark rotting from the inside out. From its highest branch hung a wedding dress, torn, weather-stained, wrapped around the trunk like a cocoon. Inside it, barely visible, was a mummified hand, wearing her ring, the ring she now wore. The hand twitched. Mira backed away. No, she whispered. No, I didn't agree to this. I didn't choose this. But the garden disagreed. The vines rustled without wind. Gloves fluttered like dead leaves. The trees whispered. You came. You opened the door. You read the letters. You wore the ring. You agreed. The woman with her face stood. It's not about choice, she said, brushing dust from the hem of her gown. It never was. He just wanted your invitation. And you gave it. She stepped closer. We all do. He makes sure of it. Mira turned and ran. Through the garden, past the gloves, past the roots that tried to snag her feet. She reached the back steps, breath ragged, heart drumming, and found Daniel waiting at the door. Or what was left of him. His eyes were bleeding, his mouth sewn shut, and carved into his forehead, in jagged letters, 7th. He fell to his knees, reached for her, and whispered through clenched teeth, as if the thread still held. Say yes. Mira couldn't get the image of Daniel out of her mind. Those sewn lips, those eyes pleading through blood. The word carved into his forehead, the 7th. He was never the husband. He was the vessel, a placeholder, and she was the sacrifice. She stumbled back into the house, dizzy with cold and rage. The ring on her finger pulsed with heat again, now tighter than ever, like it had fused to her skin. She didn't go to the bedroom. She didn't go to the study. She went straight to the grand hallway, where the largest painting of Frederick hung above the stairs. The one she had always avoided. Tonight, he was smiling, for the first time since she arrived. It was subtle, but unmistakable. The corner of his lips curled up, the eyes slightly narrowed, not in cruelty, but in satisfaction, anticipation. And beneath the painting, she now saw a plaque that hadn't been there before. It read, "The 7th returns." She agrees of her own will. She gives herself freely. She remembers her purpose. She will not leave again. Mira screamed and tore at the painting with her nails. But the canvas would not rip. Instead, her fingertips bled across the painted surface, and the blood sank in. And the smile on Frederick's face grew wider. She stepped back, panting. Something cracked behind her. A mirror on the hallway wall had shattered from the inside out. And within the shards, she saw herself, not as she was, but how he wanted her to be. Dressed in red velvet, hair coiled and pinned, lips painted with wine-colored gloss. A bride, a prize, a promise fulfilled. The mirror whispered, "Come to the study. The final vow must be spoken." She should have run. She should have fought. But her feet were already moving. The ring burned white hot, and her mind fogged like the mirrors had before. Down hallway, to the study, where the candles had already lit themselves, where the desk was gone, where instead there was now a wedding altar, old and rotting, but adorned with dried roses and crumbling lace. And standing at it was Frederick, not a ghost, not a vision, alive, or something very close to it. He smiled at her. "You came." His voice was honey poured over broken glass, soft, cutting. "You wore the ring. You saw the letters. You followed the path. You remembered who you are." Mira trembled, whispering, "I'm not her. I'm not any of them." Frederick stepped down from the altar. "You're all of them. You are the seventh, the final, the one who won't run, the one who finishes it." He held out his hand. And from behind him, the others appeared. The other Miras. 6 of them. Draped in time-worn dresses from centuries gone. Victorian, Edwardian, 1920s, 1950s, 1970s, 2000s. Each with her face. Each watching. Each smiling. And then, each began to whisper. "Say yes. Say yes. Say yes. Say yes. Say yes. Say yes." Frederick took a step closer. The room darkened. The altar cracked. "Once you do, the house becomes yours. I become yours. Forever." Mira stood still. Her heart beat like a war drum in her ears. The choice hung before her like a noose. The ring pulsed. The women watched. Frederick smiled. The study had changed. Where once there were dusty books and forgotten pipes, now stood a blackened altar, aged by time and decay. Mold crept up its legs. The roses on it were dried and brown, their petals like brittle scabs. Atop it lay a cracked goblet, half filled with a red liquid that smelled faintly of rust, wine, and iron. Frederick waited beside it, tall and terrible in a suit the color of coal. And surrounding them, the 6 other selves, the echoes of Mira, the brides before, stood like statues frozen in time, eyes fixed on her with the reverence of cultists watching their prophecy come true. Mira's heart pounded as the ring tightened on her finger. "Speak it," Frederick said. His voice was velvet and wrought. "All you have to do is speak the vow. Say the words and become whole." The altar shimmered, the candles flared, and Mira felt the invisible weight of centuries pressing down on her shoulders. She remembered the room behind the mirror. She remembered the diary, the gloves, the garden. The man who wore her husband's face. The whispers had all brought her here, but so had her own footsteps. I opened the door. I followed the tunnel. I read the letters. I wore the ring. Was that the agreement all along? Frederick lifted the goblet. One sip, one vow, one yes. That is all that remains. The other brides began to chant, not loud but together. Soft, rhythmic, almost like a hymn. She agrees. She agrees. She agrees. Mira took the goblet. It was warm, pulsing. The liquid inside it looked thicker now. It shimmered like blood beneath moonlight. She brought it close to her lips, and in that instant, the house held its breath. The ring glowed red hot. Her mind flooded with voices, not just her own. Women, generations of them, all repeating the same words over and over. You are mine. I am yours. Until the house forgets us both. That was the vow. That was what sealed it. That was what trapped them. Her lips parted. The goblet touched her mouth. And the moment the first drop hit her tongue, everything changed. The walls screamed. Not a creak, not a groan. A full-throated scream, as if the house itself had been waiting to exhale for centuries and could no longer contain it. The brides clutched their chests. Their forms flickered like candlelight in wind. Frederick stepped back, eyes wide. "What did you do?" Mira dropped the goblet. It shattered against the floor, blood spraying across the altar like paint. She tore the ring from her finger. Her skin beneath it was blackened, burnt. She threw the ring at his feet. "I never said yes," she whispered. "I just walked your path. But I never agreed." The bride's chanting faltered. Some began to cry. Some began to fade. Frederick looked betrayed, wounded even. His eyes cracked with red veins, lips trembling. "But you followed every step." "So did they," Mira said, "and you still had to ask." The house trembled. Paintings fell, windows cracked, and from the far wall a mirror shattered completely, revealing a dark, hidden door behind it. Mira turned to run. Frederick reached for her, but the altar burst into flame. The fire was red, then black, then blue. And through it all, the bride screamed, but not in fear, in relief. Mira burst through the hidden doorway behind the mirror. It led into a narrow stone corridor, coiled deep beneath the house's foundations, like a forgotten artery. The air was thick and wet. Every breath tasted like mold and metal. Roots grew through the ceiling like claws reaching for her scalp. Behind her, the study burned, flames licking upwards through the floorboards, hungry and righteous. The house howled like a grieving animal. Wood groaned, pipes shrieked. But the door behind her didn't close. It sealed, like the house was swallowing its own shame. The corridor sloped downward into a space that shouldn't have existed. A wide, circular stone chamber, lit by fire. At the center, a stone pedestal. Upon it, a book bound in skin, open to the final page. And written there in dried crimson ink was a vow Mira had never spoken. "I offer my body, my voice, and my memory. I belong to him. I agree." Beneath it, space for a signature. Her name was already written, but her hand had never held the pen. Mira stepped to the book. Wind rose inside the chamber. The candles trembled. And behind her, he came. Frederick's footsteps echoed across the stone. Not angry now. Almost begging. "Don't do this." Mira didn't turn. "You made us all believe we had a choice. That we said yes. But the house never needed permission. It only needed a performance." She raised her hand, and in it, a scrap of fabric burned to ash. The ring, destroyed in the altar's fire. The light in the chamber flickered violently. The book began to bleed. Frederick stepped forward, face distorted by centuries of unquenched hunger. "You don't understand. Without you, it crumbles. I crumble." His voice cracked like glass. "You complete me." Mira finally turned to face him. Her voice was steady. "You chained 6 of me to this place. You took our faces, our trust, our memories, and you still couldn't make any of us love you." Frederick reached for her. She slammed the book shut. The pedestal cracked down the center. The ceiling above groaned. And far above them, the house began to collapse. Room by room, beam by beam, window by window. The house was letting go. Mira ran. She didn't remember how she reached the surface. She remembered the sound of a house dying. Not in fire, in release. It sighed with centuries of grief. The front door, flung open, swung like a mouth gasping its last breath. One by one, the windows blew outward, and a thick black mist burst free like breath held too long. The sky turned blue again. The wind no longer whispered. And when she stepped onto the grass, the house was gone. Not in ruins, not in rubble. Gone. Only an imprint remained, a blackened foundation, burned grass in a silence so deep it rang in her bones. Behind her, the forest breathed again. Birdsong, wind, life. She looked at her hand. The skin where the ring had been was pale, scarred, but clean. She walked away. No footsteps followed. No voice called out. The house had let her go. Because this time, she never agreed.